we should all be proud that we have public servants like Dr. Fauci and many others. I mean, they are the heroes and the heroines of the moment. And of course, he has to be diplomatic because he's dealing with the president of the United States. But the truth of the matter is you got a president who is arrogant, who is ignorant, who is literally, as I said, undermining the good work of scientists, who keeps making these absurd remarks. And in fact, he underestimated, diminished the initial threat facing this country. A president who had a brain in his head would have brought the scientists together and say, look, how serious is this threat? What do we do? What do we do now? Not talk about, well, I have, what was his statement? I have an unusual ability to understand the issue, or it's going to all clear up
in
a hunch. You know, this is not what the people of this country or the world need. So he has done harm in delaying the kind of response.
Do you think it's cost people their lives? Because initially he said, look, there's 15 cases, but they're all getting better. It may just go away. It could miraculously disappear from our shore.
What a serious president dealing with serious scientists would have said, whoa, we have a potential crisis here. We have to prepare for the worst case possibilities. We got to get moving on this. Maybe it won't be that bad, but we got to prepare for the worst. And clearly his thing was, well, you know, I'm on top of it. I think he's still talking about being on top of it. Not going to be such a serious problem. And that
essentially said it had it under control today.
Yeah, they got it under control. I mean, the scientists are talking about hundreds of thousands of people dying. He has it under control.
You know, for many of us, spent time overseas in some places where, you know, terrible things that happen, there's conflicts, but there's a lot of our citizens who have not experienced anything remotely like this, not seen grocery stores empty, not seen restaurants shut down, not seen, you know, a potential pandemic, which has a potential for serious damage in this country. I think this is an opportunity for sort of a realization of the importance of citizenship, and taking care of myself is actually taking care of somebody else. And I'm not going to buy all the hand sanitizer, because even if I could find it, because it doesn't matter if I have it all. If my friend over here doesn't have it, it's dangerous to me too.
I mean, I think what you're saying, Anderson, is that if there has ever been a moment when we are in this together, not just philosophically or from a moral perspective, but from a reality perspective. If I'm sick and I touch you, guess what? You're going to get sick. Your job is to make sure that I don't get sick or get the treatment that I need. But it really, the point that I try to make tonight in the debate is that while we have to move incredibly aggressively in terms of the coronavirus, while we have to move very aggressively in terms of the economic fallouts, especially for working people, for small businesses, for the children, for the elderly, how are people going to eat? What happens when you lose your job? How are you going to get income? We got to deal with that. And my view is that we make everybody whole. That's what we've got to do. We don't have to worry about just the oil companies and Wall Street. We have to worry about all of our people. But it's also a time for reflection. I think that what happens after this crisis is over, and it will be over, are we satisfied with a healthcare system which is not a system? I mean, at the end of the day, we have 87 million people who are really nervous about whether they can afford to go to the doctor or not. We have a complicated system. You know, people saying, okay, well, we're going to pay for treatment. Well, maybe yes, maybe not. Where do I get the treatment? We do not have a healthcare system. That's indisputable. And I hope and I believe that people understand that when we spend so much money for healthcare and we're so unprepared and so many people are uninsured, and we have pharmaceutical companies right now thinking, oh man, how can I make a fortune on this one? How disgusting is that? So it gets back, I think, to the kind of point that you make. What kind of nation do we want to be? Do we want to be a nation where we work together to address the problems facing the country, or a nation where the people on top continue to make huge amounts of money through greed and corruption?
I want to play something that Vice President Biden said along these lines, and have you respond to what he said.
We have problems we have to solve now. Now, what's a revolution going to do? Disrupt everything in the meantime? Look, the senator talks about his Medicare for all. He still hasn't told you how he's going to ever get it passed. He hasn't told you how, in fact, there's any possibility of that happening. He hadn't told you how much it's going to cost. He hadn't tell you how it's going to apply. It doesn't kick in for 4 years, even after it passes. We want a revolution. Let's act now. Pass the Biden health care plan, which takes Obamacare, restores all the cuts made to it, subsidizes it further, provides for lower drug prices, make sure that there's no hidden bills, make sure that we invest, what I want to invest $50 billion in dealing with underlying diseases that are of great consequence, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. Make sure that we have a Medicare option that's in a public option providing Medicare for us. We can do that now. I can get that passed. I can get that done if I'm President of the United States of America. That will be a fundamental change, and it happens now. I can tell you from experience, being a significant consumer of health care, with my sons, my family, all the things we've gone through. What people want is hope, and they need it now, not 4 years from now. And Bernie still hasn't told us how he's going to pay for it. We're talking about a $30+ trillion plan.
He's saying essentially, people don't want a revolution.
People overwhelmingly in this country understand that healthcare is right. That was pretty effective, I think, at his part. He distorted virtually everything that I'm trying to do here. Is it a revolution to do what every other country on earth does and guarantee healthcare to all people? Is that a revolution? Is it a revolution to say to the drug companies, you know what? Can't charge us 10 times more for the same exact drugs as you're charging in Canada or in other countries? Is it a revolution to say that if you work 40 hours a week in the richest country on earth, you should not live in poverty? Is it a revolution? And by the way, to say that in the year 2020, when we talk about public education, it should include making public colleges and universities tuition-free and canceling all student debt. Now, what's interesting is that Biden has adopted some of the, this is what always happens. Suddenly today, Joe Biden is a free-spending socialist. My God, we're going to pay for everything. But
I'm not sure he would say he's a...
Yeah, well, that's what he was saying. Oh, no problem. But at the end of the day, that whole rhetoric from Biden that he can get it done, what is he getting done? He's basically, after all is said and done, maintaining the status quo in healthcare. That's what he's like, minor changes. And you know what the status quo is? He's talking about how I'm going to pay for it. Study after study showed that Medicare for all will cost us less than the status quo. His will cost $50 trillion over 10 years. Ours about $47 trillion. Under his proposal, which he's not going to change, the average American in a family of 60,000 pays $12,000 a year for healthcare. That is unbelievable. Our plan is substantially lower.
At this point, though, I hate to talk about sort of the politics of this, but we are in a presidential race, and in spite of this, it continues. At this stage, what is the path ahead for you?
Well, the path ahead is to bring as many people who do not traditionally vote into the political process. And that is young people, it is working class people who understand that we have a corrupt political system in which billionaires buy elections and make it easier for the wealthy to become richer while working class people are struggling.
That's been the argument you've made, understandably, and the idea of we're going to have this massive voter turnout, people who haven't been in the process. And in some cases, you've been able to do that with Latino voters coming in Nevada and elsewhere. Young people not coming out in the numbers. I mean, it's been disappointing, clearly.
Young people, I mean, I think the media hasn't gotten it quite right. Young people are voting in higher numbers, not as high in some states as the general population. Older people vote in very large numbers. But let me...
Because that is what the vice president was saying tonight. It's like there has been people coming out, but it's been older people.
But let me rephrase that and say this. Two things. Again, I think we are winning the ideological struggle, and we won it tonight. There's Joe Biden suddenly echoing a lot of, he adopted, I would go further, but...
But you're making the argument that the road ahead for you is bringing more people into the process. Is that those people, bringing them in to then vote for Biden ultimately?
No, they're not going to vote for Biden. That's a different constituency. What you have politically is, God bless them, older people vote in large numbers. Unfortunately, young people who are voting for us overwhelmingly, 70, 80%, do not vote in large numbers. Now, this takes you to the general election, all right? So it's one thing to get people to vote in a primary, but when you have not what I call non-traditional voters, people say, well, I don't know, they're not going to vote in a primary. They will more likely vote in a general election. How do you beat Trump if you don't have a huge voter turnout? How do you have a huge voter turnout if you're not bringing young people in, if you're not bringing working class people who have begun to see through the lies of Donald Trump?
So for
I think we're better positioned to do that than Joe Biden is.
But or is your hope, if you can't be the person, you can't be the nominee, to at least get Biden to come in order to appeal to the young people who are coming out for you, to get Biden to come to at least embrace more of your position?
You know, it's a funny thing. I mean, I think you have heard media and others talking about, isn't it remarkable how when we had 18 candidates to begin this process, so many of them have moved so far of where we were 4 years ago. You just heard this tonight. Yesterday, Biden basically is saying, yeah, I voted for that bankruptcy bill. Bad idea. I'm going to adopt Elizabeth Warren's position. That's a good bill. Okay. Today he says, oh, I think we should make public colleges and universities tuition free up to a certain level. Yes, we have brought Biden. Well, I will see how real it is, but I think people have got to make the choice about whether they want the real thing, something that I've been fighting for years, or somebody who just changed his views the last 2 days.